Many of you have been to numerous festival sessions this week and over the years, but for a lot of you here, this is your first taste of the festival, and we hope it will not be your last. We'd like to welcome all of you, and we are so grateful you chose to spend your Saturday morning with us and to take part in this important conversation. Now, in its 28th year, the Festival of Faiths seeks to provide a welcoming space for all to honor our differences, to listen and learn from one another, and to celebrate our connection as one human family. It's also a place where we sometimes have difficult conversations about the challenges that persist in our community and in the world. We'll be doing just that today, and it is our hope that we'll use this as an opportunity to tap into our collective creativity and to imagine a future full of potential for all people. Now, we're going to have this conversation, and we're going to stick to 1 hour once we get going. At the conclusion of this, we would like to invite you to stick around for our brief closing celebration, but we'll let you know before we transition to that point. And as is customary at the festival, we are going to have a moment of silence just to kind of get grounded and prepared to listen and to engage. So, if we could just sit back for 1 minute or so. All right, and before I pass it over to start the conversation, I wanted to give some brief introductions of the folks who are up front here. And I'm going to start with someone who unfortunately is not able to join us, and that is Mathies Jones. And for those of you who are not from Louisville, Mathies Jones is an iconic civil rights leader who has connections to many of these people up here and who has influenced so many people. Unfortunately, she suffered a fall this week and is unable to be here. It's my understanding that she's recovering but could not make it. But we are going to share some background on Mathies nonetheless. Mathies' public activism began soon after graduating from Central High School. While attending the University of Louisville, which had just recently desegregated its main campus, Mathies was denied a work-study position and told white students would not accept working alongside her. That's when Mathies left college and joined the Black Workers Coalition to fight for equality. In over 6 decades of activism since, Mathies has organized countless demonstrations, public conversations, and boycotts focused on women's and workers' rights, environmental justice, peace, and police community relations. She marched with Martin Luther King Jr., protested Louisville for open housing and against segregation in public schools, and was a founding member of the National Alliance Against Racist and Political Repression. Next up, I'm going to introduce a longtime friend to Mathies Jones, and that is Miss Rhonda Mathies. Rhonda is a longtime civil rights activist, retired social worker, and a lifelong Louisvillian who proudly calls the city's Smoketown neighborhood home. Rhonda co-founded the Smoketown Originals Group, which aims to foster pride and share heritage of the historically Black neighborhood. Rhonda was active in the Kentucky Alliance Against Racist and Political Repression in the 80s and 90s, and she continues to remain active in racial justice efforts, including protests following the death of Breonna Taylor. She's lovingly referred to as one of the mothers of the movement. We then have Mr. Robert LeVertis Bell, grandson of Mattie Jones, who is himself a longtime activist, father, and public school teacher. He grew up in West Louisville, and from an early age, he learned the importance of community organizing by stuffing envelopes and walking picket lines with his grandmother. By the time he was a teen, Robert's community activism had begun to take its own shape. He was involved in Brat Magazine and the founding vice president of the Brick House, an arts and activism community center. He's been involved in many local organizations, ranging from the Shelby Park Neighborhood Association to Citizens Against Police Abuse. Finally, we have Mr. Melvin Boyd, whose activism started in 2020 following the death of Breonna Taylor. After hearing of her death by police, Melvin took to the streets to call for justice. He continued this fight by joining forces with established organizations such as the Kentucky Alliance and the Louisville Urban League. He then went on to co-found 2 local nonprofits, Men on the Move and Justice for Louisville. He continues to be unwavering in his demand for justice by being active in local community meetings, rallies, church, and community networks to bring about change for Black and brown people. And finally, I'd like to introduce our moderators, who actually asked that I be brief with their bios. So I will just say welcome to Gabrielle Jones of Louisville Public Media and Josh Moss of Louisville Magazine. Now, Josh, you can take it from here, and we will start the clock to keep this to 1 hour.
All right, clock's going, 1 hour. Can you all hear me okay? All right, so we really want this to be a participatory discussion. We'll ask some questions of everybody up here. We do not sit up here as experts. We think all of you out there have just as much to share as everybody up here. Couple quick, air quotes, rules. No questions. So if you have something to share, formulate it as a statement. We've just found that that leads to a much more dynamic live experience. And then if you're able, stand up, say your name. If you have an organization you're associated with, you want to let us know about, that'd be great. And just raise your hand, we'll be sure to get to you. I wanted to start, is that good on the rules, Sarah, wherever you are? Yes. I want to start with this, so just everybody, and if you're up there, feel free to raise your hand too, we'll get to you. But just so quick show of hands, the answers will be mostly agree, mostly disagree, or you're not sure with this statement. My faith has never been stronger. So show of hands, mostly agree. My faith has never been stronger. Okay. Mostly disagree. Okay. And not sure? Okay. I wonder, starting with the audience, anyone who mostly disagrees with that idea, willing to share about why? Go ahead.
I'm wondering when you posed that question if you meant faith in God or faith in my
How you define it.
My faith in my fellow humans is down, way down. Faith in God, about the same.
Okay. Anybody else want to share who said mostly disagree? Over here, I see a hand. Yeah, right there.
My faith in my country is at an all-time low.
Okay. What about people who said mostly agree? Anybody willing to share there? Yeah, right here. Go ahead.
Here.
We got a microphone for you right
I
there.
feel like I have no choice but to go with go with my faith.
No choice but to. How does that resonate with you? That idea of faith, yeah.
Well, I don't generally think of my motivation as being that of, whether my faith is up or faith is down. I usually think that we have places we have to go and things we have to accomplish, and whether I believe they're going to happen or whether I don't believe they're going to happen, or whether I strongly in my heart, know they're going to happen, it's kind of irrelevant. I just know that they have to happen, and therefore I have to work regardless of whether I'm feeling positive about it or not.
How about you, Rhonda?
Well, my faith is high. Humanity is sort of shaky, but I know God sits high, we sit low, and all things work for the good who loves the Lord. And we have all had this in each generation, our trying times. So we have to work through it. We hopefully people of like minds will come together for change in spite of what we see that's happening, that the good will come out of it.
How about you, Melvin?
I would probably agree that my faith in God is pretty much consistent. I think sometimes it may get weak at times because I want him to do something, or I want him to like bring about the change that we all kind of wanting at times. But I would agree that my faith in humanity probably is weak because of the things that we see going on around us, getting worse and worse at times. So sometimes that can be weak, but I still try to hold on to faith that like we gonna get better.
Mm-hmm. I'm going to ask a question up here, but just throughout, if you want to share, please raise your hand. So we're here because of Dr. King's speech in the framework of justice. And I spent a lot of time with this speech. I revisited it. He uses the word justice 8 times. He uses the word injustice 3 times. He uses phrases like security of justice, palace of justice, quicksand of racial injustice. He says the whirlwinds of revolt will continue to shake the foundations of our nation until the bright day of justice emerges. I was also reminded of our city in 2020. The chant, no justice, no peace, that word became ingrained in a lot of our lives over the course of the protests. And I just wonder, I want to start up here with the panel. Maybe, Melvin, I want to start with you. That word justice, what's your relationship to it today? How do you sort of define it today in 2024?
Our relation to it today is a lot stronger than what it was because of 2020. That really tied me to it. I was always a person growing up in faith wanting to stand on the right side of things, but that really brought me closer to it. Being involved out there in the streets, daily, being involved in justice, it just kept me grounded and rooted. But my involvement in the way I feel about it now, I'm going to keep fighting for it because it's what I believe in and it's ingrained in me. And I just try to do my best to encourage and inform others around me so that they can make better decisions and we can try to do better as a community.
Mm-hmm. How about you, Rhonda?
Well, justice is a constant struggle. And these days and times, as far as 2020 and 2024, it's wavering as far as justice because systemic racism is still alive structurally, and we think that we have sort of chopped something away, and then we just see it keep building more and more. I'm like Melvin, that we can continue have to fight for that because justice is a constant struggle, but at times you wonder, are we ever going to see justice, the justice that Dr. Martin Luther King was talking about as far as one people coming together for justice?
Mm-hmm. How do you define it?
It's not a term that I use a lot, honestly.
Yeah.
Only because when I think of justice, a lot of times people think of it as a sort of punitive thing. It's something that happens when someone does something wrong, and then they say, well, we're seeking justice to extract some sort of retribution. And I don't think of my life or my work or my politics in those terms. Obviously, I do see injustice in the world. I do see that there are, frankly, crimes that have been committed that should be accounted for. But that should not be the horizon of our political imagination. I think we should be thinking, justice or whatever, recounting, repaying for the debts that are owed to various communities, various individuals, as a first step for sure. But I think ultimately we would like to see a world where everyone's needs are taken care of, and not only on top of that, people have beauty and pleasure in the things that are sort of outside of the rubric of justice. So we need we need to get our needs met first and foremost, but we also need beyond that to imagine a world where we're actually thriving and doing things that are beyond that bare minimum level.
Yeah, I think I saw a hand up here. If we could get a microphone up there, and as the mic gets there, Rhonda, you said wavering. Mm-hmm. I wonder, is there a time, and there's also a hand here we'll get to. Real quick, let's go here and then I'll finish that thought. Go ahead.
I'd like to offer a little bit different understanding of justice than the one that's most commonly used, which is Aristotle, who said justice is rendering to each his due. I think the problem with that is it's who's doing the rendering and who's deciding who is due. And actually, in the Hebrew Bible and in a lot of traditional African cultures, justice is really all about figuring out how to restore right relationships in which everyone is a subject. And the conversation is really, what does that mean? What are right relationships? What do they look like?
Thank you for sharing that. I saw a hand here too.
Can sound be louder?
Question for sound. Can the sound be louder? Said absolutely. Let's do a hand here and then we'll go here. Yeah, go ahead. Stand if you can and, sit and share your name.
My name's David. When confronted with the term justice, I think we have two separate things. Oh, thank you. We have two separate ideas that we're dealing with. And one is a societal courtroom-based justice, which I think today is diverging radically from our sense of social justice, the justice that we as people, as opposed to as a society, are dealing with. And I think that's what a lot of the conflict is coming from, two justices that are conflicting.
Thank you for sharing that. Right here.
Another David. I look at justice, I think the core of justice is inequality. And if you look at the last 30 years, how, the middle and lower stayed the same and the upper just went up, 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 up. And it seems to be the base of justice is fairness. It's honesty and fairness. And if you can get, the same treatment as everyone, and not just, the price of your lawyer, it's justice should be honesty and should be fairness. And it's not, because the system has a lot of issues.
Anybody else? I want to finish that thought. When you said unwavering, wavering, was there a time where you felt like it wasn't wavering, where you had sort of like more confidence in, I'll say Louisville, that's where we are. I know some people who are watching might not be in our city, but just in general, where you felt maybe most optimistic?
Oh, that's a hard question. And to be honest, no. For me, it's always seemed to be wavering. No.
Yeah.
Well, that actually brings me to a question. We talked a little bit about struggle and the consistency of struggle, and that's certainly the framework that I grew up with as a young black woman, as fighting for justice and progress and the way that we would live. And I think there are times, particularly in this moment, where a lot of people are feeling sort of very beaten down by the fight, but this is not the first time we've been here, right? There's always been a framework of struggle and fighting for progress in times that didn't always seem most friendly to the goal that we individually or collectively had. What do you feel like we can learn from the past where we are able to push through trying times and advance things forward? And I'll start with you, Rhonda, but that's a question I think for all of us here in this community.
What can we, because of now with social media and we have the advantage as far as real time and looking back as far as the struggles of the ancestors and how resilient they were back then, that we stand on those shoulders and that we can use that and utilize that as far as us engaging with each other, that we still can build upon that and have hope as a people. We dealing with, when we talk about racism and justice, and it's a caste system across the world, and particularly here in Louisville.
It's all right. We have a coffee spill. It's not a big deal. Yeah.
Dealing with that, but I'm encouraged by the voices of the young people. Back then, it was always saying, wait your time, wait your turn, and they're not having that. They're stepping up to the plate and say, it is our time. They will listen to the elders and what we have to say, but they are coming together to strategize and mobilize to build to make a difference in that area. So that is hopeful, and that we will see change for that. What you say, Melvin?
I think one of the things I think about is the fact that right now we can look back and see what has worked, but a lot of times right now in society, we're so divided, we keep doing the wrong things, expecting different results. Mm-hmm. And there were some things that they did in the past that worked, and we refuse almost to go back and do those things that actually work. Martin Luther King and some of them were successful in doing some things because they were able to come together. It didn't mean they always agreed. Mm-hmm. I mean, we've seen the movies, we've seen the documentaries, we've seen, different things. They didn't always agree, but they had a common goal. And in society now, with so many different opinions, we refuse to come together, even though we have a common goal. Mm-hmm. And on those that are being oppressed, is really on us. Because on the other side, they can come together even if they disagree. Mm-hmm. We refuse to because we focus on so many small things that keep us separate when ultimately we're never reaching the goal that we're trying to get to. And if we could look back in the past and in history to do those things, like I said, they were able to come together and unify. That's one of the things that's missing biggest right now.
What about you?
Yeah, so the question I think was about learning from the past.
Mm-hmm. And that doesn't have to be the distant past.
Well, no, that's what I'm saying. Like the past can be, the past is the past. Last week is the past. I mean, I've learned a lot. I've learned a lot in the past 2 weeks personally. But yeah, I feel like at this point, I'm a little bit of an elder in some of my organizing communities, and I have to talk to some of my people who are younger than me. I'm in my mid-40s at this point, so I have people who are in their 20s and teens who I have to talk to and counsel sometimes about, just they look for my advice sometimes, and I have to tell them, yes, it looks really bad right now, but we have a responsibility as those of us who work to change the world, to learn from our past, to look at examples from the past, and if you do just even a little bit of that, you know that people have organized, people have worked for what we might call justice or whatever, in contexts that are way more difficult than the ones that we're experiencing right now. I recently was a part of a reading group for a book called Hammer and Hoe by the scholar Robin D.G. Kelley, and it's about these sharecroppers in the 30s in Alabama and some of the amazing organizing that they did, black sharecroppers in Alabama. And this is not just at risk of life and limb, but that for their families and so forth. And that's just one example. I mean, we look at the example of Dr. King and people of that generation who were organizing in the face of being murdered, people who were organizing in Germany in the 1930s and so forth, who were really, really fighting for their lives in a way that frankly, some of these 22-year-olds that I'm talking to haven't not had to experience yet. So when people get really, really down on the current conditions that we're in, I think they have a responsibility to look back for inspiration, those examples, but also, much like Melvin said, to look at things that they've done well, things that they that maybe didn't do so well, and repurpose some of those things or reimagine those things in the context that we're in, because that's if we don't, this thing, right? If you don't know history, you're doomed to repeat it. Of course, the other side of that is, as I say, is if you don't know history, you don't know what you're repeating. And so we have a responsibility to understand our forebears and the struggles they went through and the context they went through, in order to both push our own work forward and also to give ourselves some sort of inspiration for our souls.
I see a hand back here, and then we've got one over here.
I think the relationship between the past and the present is relevant, but I see it also as eroding, because at least back in the time of the past, you had a faith toward a movement toward the truth, and now the institution of truth is eroding and almost non-existent, and everything is politicized from the top justice system, from the Supreme Court, all the way down to us, is eroding a lot of people's faith, and it seems like they're reversing all the advancements from the past, and it's just seemed like that's why a lot of the things today seem like they're getting worse is because all of the advantages from the past are being eroded.
Over here, yeah.
Yeah, David again. I just want to recommend everybody a project I took on a few years ago that helped with my sense of the past. I decided for no reason I can remember to read a biography of every American president. Just to see, and a good scholarly biography, not from the same perspective, but each one, it took the perspective of that president. So I got all the political views, all the sides. And it changed my sense of American history 180 degrees. The things I thought I knew, I didn't know. It was spectacular. And the two issues that come up in every single biography, no matter when or who, the economy, naturally, and race. Race is there in every single, from Washington, I've gotten to George W. Bush. I haven't found a really good biography about Barack Obama yet. I'm waiting for that, please. But every single one of them, race is a huge issue. And I don't know what you will find if you do this, but I found that America from the beginning has been a racist nation. And I didn't know. But do the work, and it's there.
Robert, you wanted to?
Yeah, I think that's a really good point. And to the topic of this conversation, I think obviously that Have a Dream speech is an amazing speech in American history. And every January, and I'm a teacher, I talk to my students about that, and I talk to the letter from Birmingham Jail. But I think we have a responsibility to, in the context of this conversation, to look at not just that speech, but look at Dr. King's political monographs. He wrote some really, really amazing political work because we think of him as this sort of great, oratory specialist or whatever, but he was actually, in addition to that, a very powerful strategic and political thinker. He wrote a book called Why We Can't Wait in 1964. His later works, in 1967, he wrote, it's called Chaos and Community, Where We Go From Here, or something like that. These are really important texts that show us his development. He was a very young man. He was, by the time he didn't live to be my age. He was a very, very important strategic thinker. We can think about specifically the context that he was engaging in and the politics that he was going for. And when we talk about this particular speech, the Have a Dream speech, the original title, as you guys may or may not know, wasn't actually I Have a Dream. The early drafts did not have those words in the text at all. He gave it a few times. It was originally called Normalcy, Never Again. And his argument, and again, this was a political argument. It wasn't just a political imagination, it was a political argument. His political argument in this speech was simply that whatever we have experienced in the past, this normal that we've experienced over the past 20, 30 years at this point, that David just brought up, the history of this country, we cannot return to that idea of that status quo ever again. And we have to politically make that the case. Again, this was not just him imagining a new world. This was him saying there's a blueprint to actually achieving that world, and that comes through strategic analysis and really, really hard political work.
I wanted to pose a question to Rhonda and to Robert, and then I have a separate one for you, Melvin. Miss Maddie Jones isn't here today, as we learned at the top. I wonder what stories she shared with you, Rhonda, as a close friend, and then with you as her grandson, specifically about Dr. King, that sticks with you today.
Oh, let me think about that. Specifically with Dr. King is that that he was such a humble person, and that how the close conversations they had, as far as, because he had a brother that lived there. This is what brought him to Louisville so often, and with the open housing, and how they would strategize, and everyone see him such as a moderate, but he had a fire in him, and he was a radical in his own way, and that's what a Big Mama Maddie Jones appreciated with Dr. King, behind closed doors, as far as that he could be comfortable and sharing even some of, as far as the Malcolm, because I don't think they even met, but they did once. I think just once.
I think about it just once.
But that she just stated is that she just appreciated the hard work that he wanted for all people, and he realized that the struggle as far as black people had in America and what we was going through at the time right here in Louisville, Kentucky, and she just appreciated his work.
Mm-hmm. What did she share with you?
I can't recall very many in the way of like personal stories that her, because I don't think she actually spent that much time with him, if at all, as a person. But I do, the books were in my house. It was in her house where I sort of grew up to some degree. And we did talk about, I actually remember very distinctly having a conversation about in the letter from Birmingham jail, his conversation about the white moderate. A lot of guys are aware of that. Just being wary of the impulse to, like I said earlier, of when you say just even the white moderate, the moderate in general, who often sees in our struggle some idealistic good, but practically will push back against fundamental changes because those fundamental changes would, to some degree, be damaging to their own status quo. And that is a very dangerous place to be in politically. I think she told me that in so many ways over the past 30 years, particularly, as I was a
Melvin, related to this idea, I wonder your understanding of civil rights movement in the 60s, protests in the 60s. How was 2020 different? And I guess also how was it the same?
Interestingly enough, I just had an opportunity to go to DC and went to the National African American Museum. And looking at some of the videos, I was telling a friend I was with, it almost looks the same. That's what was so scary about it. I remember learning about it in school. You read the books, you see certain little videos, but then living it, like I said, I was out there, almost every day. It's terrifying to realize we still dealing with the same thing. No, they didn't necessarily sick dogs on us, but they could attack us physically still the same way. They attack people by, putting charges and felonies on people. And people were getting felonies left and right, for things like standing on the sidewalk, people facing felony charges. And some probably still fighting those charges today, even now. As much as they try to, clear it up and different things, and the Commonwealth talks about doing that, a lot of those people are still fighting felony charges for things like standing on the sidewalk. And I had the opportunity to talk with some of the attorneys one day, and I said, it's crazy. I said, I don't have any charges with you all, thank God. But it's crazy to think that the people that we're out here for, that did the crime of going into Breonna Taylor's home, I've been in the court cases both last year and this year when they went, and just hearing what happened in court, it's mind-blowing. It's the DOJ report, the statistics, the trajectory of bullets, of what they did, those officers, none of them really being charged, but the people that protest against it, even though the DOJ found that they were guilty and federally they were indicted and different things like that, they have more punishment than the people that did actual crime. Even if it means I have to go out and pick up trash, they're not doing anything. Mm-hmm. So you want me to pick up trash for standing on the sidewalk saying, hey, someone did wrong, but the person that went in there and was shooting, endangering her life, the neighbors, people that lived around there, they have no punishment? That doesn't make logical sense. And the funny thing was, she told me, well, I never thought of it that way. I never thought, I was like, you didn't think that the people that were shooting bullets, and I mean, in case no one ever got to hear, there were so many bullets fired that night. So many. There was a veteran that was upstairs who came out, and this is at court this year. He testified that his 2-year-old daughter he was picking up, he worked a night shift, he was picking up his 2-year-old daughter. And when the bullets started flying, his daughter freaked out. he grabbed his daughter, threw her between his legs, and folded himself over her. Because he said it sounded like I was back in Iraq. He served in Iraq and somewhere else. And he said it sounded like I was back over there. He's now back in therapy. He's doubling his medication. He can't sleep. He has shakes. He's crying on the stand as he's talking and starting to shake because it just triggered him. Knowing that stuff happened now, and it's the same thing that was happening in the 60s, is, I think, what leads to what you were asking earlier, why the faith in humanity is weak. Because as humans, why are we doing this to each other? As humans, why are we not holding each other accountable? As humans, why is there no justice for wrongdoing? And I think he was saying something about the truth. You know, nowadays people don't want the truth. They just want you to go with their feeling. Even when the facts is there, and people are arguing fact for their feeling. And that's problematic when we're all trying to seek what we want is justice.
Well, that brings me to an interesting point about the relationship between the past and the present. Something that Dr. King said in this speech that we're using as a framework is that 1963 was not the end, but just the beginning, right? And you think about him in this physical space, sort of on the Lincoln Memorial, giving this speech at this time, and that made me think about here in this community, people protesting during 2020, and sort of what that must have felt like as a crescendo moment. Like, is it the beginning of some movement? Is it the end of some movement? Where do you all think we are today? And if we're not where we should be, what do you think we should do to get there?
Well, the movement continues. We're still in a movement. It's funny as far as thinking of Breonna Taylor and how we collectively all came together. And now we sort of splintered off, and it's like business as usual. And that's heartbreaking because we still can make some moves and be in places where people are in seats who are making policy that is killing us. It's 2020 was so devastating. And now that we're in 2024, and we keep repeating that change is going to come. When is change coming? You know, that's the point. And how can we build on this movement for humanity to really care about each other? I hate for these young people are so frustrated to get back in the streets, and we could possibly have a really war because people are really sick and tired of being sick and tired. And that's I think that's the big case that we're struggling with right now. I would like to say it's going to get better, but deep in my heart, I feel as though it's going to get worse.
Yeah, I would like to share some of Ms. Rhonda's pessimism, unfortunately. Not that I think that things are necessarily going to get worse, but when we talk about, I mean, I was out there doing the protests every day, most days, so was my entire family for that matter. And it did feel like something might actually change. I think that's why we were there. But I think at this point, 4.5 years later, it seems pretty clear to me that there were no, at least not just locally, but nationally, from this huge uprising, the consequences politically have been minimal. Just on the extremely, I mean, it's not paltry to the families of the victims, of course, but as far as justice or whatever for everyone else, even getting the cops convicted has been a struggle, let alone some of the broader goals that we have as far as that the movement ostensibly had regarding making the world a safer place, making the world a stronger place for Black and brown people in the midst of the possibility of police violence. And so yeah, to go back to the earlier question, as far as differences between now and then, we have to ask why were they able to make some significant gains when we weren't able to? I mean, in 1964 we get the Civil Rights Act after the March on Washington. Nothing even remotely close to that sort of political changes happened in response to the 2020 uprisings. I think one of the major reasons for that is that coming out of 2020, there was no long-term organization. There's no mass movement that we can point to that is a lever of power for the people who are in the protests, who are in the streets, to actually participate in actually creating social change, either in their communities or in government. And there's a reason for that. I think a major reason for that is something that some academics have described as, a phenomenon that people have described as elite capture. Mm-hmm. Elite capture is basically, and you guys all probably know it if you don't know it, it is the process through which the elites that sort of run the country, political elites, economic elites, co-opt and repurpose political movements to the point that the attendant parts of those movements are enmeshed within the power structure itself. This happens through cronyism, it happens through careerism, it happens through the nonprofit industrial complex, in which, after protests and so forth, you see an emergence of a bunch of nonprofits that are funded by, the various wealthy people in the town or country or whatever, and that's where the energy goes. The energy goes from a mass movement oriented towards having a lever of power in society and in politics to an organization or a sort of conglomerate of organizations, each working individually, that are fighting for grants and so forth, and without any sort of accountability to the streets themselves and to the actual mass movement that was being mobilized. That happened in this city to a great degree, and I think everyone who's honest about that will know that. So that's one of the reasons. It just happened everywhere. I think a major reason that we did not have the long-term victories, any long-term victories from those protests, is related to that fact.
I'd like the quote that Gabrielle shared about 1963 not being an end but a beginning. I wonder how that sits with you all, and specifically around the idea of progress. I see a hand here, and then anyone else, if you have a thought about that, I'd love to hear.
Yes, I've been swirling some things in my head. I read maybe the most soothing take on the presidential election, that it's framing through like establishment versus anti-establishment, and in the sense of I'm an anti-establishment fan. I feel like I'm not a fan of the way it's manifesting currently, but I guess what you're saying about sort of the co-opting of the power structures. I'm in mental health, and I don't know what's going to happen if we continue to say like there are experts who can solve mental health, there are credentialed professionals, when in reality like the work of caring for each other is looking in the eyes, hearing people and saying I've experienced that as well. And so I'm just in terms of 1963 being a beginning, I wonder what it would look like for people who want the establishment to lose some power, to, I don't know, like just stop going to them, because in some ways, like maybe it's a little bit less about how a person looks in their body and more about like where do they stand on the line, because like there's plenty of elites who we could look at and say. So I don't know, I'm not necessarily asking anything, but those are just some things that I wonder if you all could connect back to the topic. Thank you.
Anybody else? Yeah, right here.
Yes, I can see where you were talking about the younger people are so exhausted. My first protest was 1961, before Dr. Martin Luther King even started it. I went to an all-girls high school, Loretta High School in the West End, and then we had one black student, and we all decided to take the bus and go downtown to Kresge's, I think was the dime store, to go up to the counter to get a 25-cent milkshake. And they served all of us except her. There were 5 of us. And I said, well, where's her milkshake? And they said, well, she can't be served. So I knocked mine over. So I didn't get arrested, though. So they just threw us all out. So I can see the frustration of your protest, and it's exhausting, I know.
Thank you for sharing that. We have one here.
So I am surrounded by college-age students every single day, and I watch the college-age students that were involved in the protest and how it impacted them, but also how hard they fought and how hard they continue to fight. But I am losing some hope in the fact that I see a change in today's college-age students, that they really are beat down. And I had conversations with them last year at the end of the legislature when the anti-DIA legislation got defeated, to talk about why they weren't engaged in that and what they were going to do, because it's going to be back, right, in several months, and why they weren't engaged in that. And they said some things that really scared me about how they've decided that they really just need to keep their heads down and take care of themselves. And I just think we really need to be keeping our eyes on our high school youth and our college-age youth today that really are our future. And I see great growth among scientists and students who care about the environment, but I just feel a shift in the students that really want to stand up and put their energy into fighting for justice.
Yeah, I saw one over here.
Thank you. I keep hearing comments about short-term and long-term plans, the difference between chess and checkers. And I think that we don't, as a group of people who are interested in seeing a fairer and more equitable society, I don't think we think about the long-term plans. You talk about the high school students who are giving up. These people were born and raised in an educational system that doesn't function half of what mine did, and I'm 54, and I'm a product of JCPS. The education I got in the public school system 40 years ago, 45 years ago, was twice as good as what they get now. The idea of defunding education is part of the long-term plan. A less educated populace is more easy to control. They are easier to bully. And I don't think any of us have stopped to think about all of the different fingers and different pathways that that long-term plan has taken. There is a reason why now Nazism is on the rise. Most of us, or not most of us, my uncles that fought in World War II are dead and gone. So are 99.95% of the people who fought with them. So the people that were on the other side, the Nazis, they taught this to their kids and their grandkids. But it doesn't seem like on the other side we really stopped and thought that we had to keep teaching people what was wrong. It's like we said, okay, we're done. The Nazis are gone, they're defeated, everybody can go back home and do what they want. And that is also true for the other issues that we see in inequality, the way that blacks are treated, the fact that we all of a sudden became a post-racial society at a certain point, at least for a lot of white moderates, or a lot of white folks who were raised that they didn't have to think about that anymore. And so I don't know how we get to a point where we start playing chess and stop playing checkers. Thank you.
I would say one of the things, just as a small point that you can do, and for I think most of the people in here, because they actually care about community and things like that, start going to city council meetings. Yeah. Start showing up to your township meetings. That's a part of the chess game, because none of us go. Most people don't go to that, but that's where they're passing those legislations on education. That's where they're passing, where they're funding things in the city, and we're wondering why we ain't got transportation, and we ain't got no funding for schools, and this school over here ain't got nothing, and then your neighborhood's falling apart. In city council and all these meetings that they're having, they're passing this stuff, and they're able to pass it because no one's there to speak up. No one's there to say they disagree. No one's there to fight against it, so they're passing it. I heard of another legislation they want to pass for those that live in the West End, where they want them to pay a higher tax to have EMS workers. To get EMS, you call 911 and want somebody to save your life, but I got to pay more. That's something they want to pass down the line. And they will pass it if no one goes in those rooms to say, hey, why should I have to pay a higher tax to save my life? And it comes from someone else on the other side having what I would say, just a hateful heart, because of whatever reasons they have. But those is what we need. Those are meetings that we need to go to as a community. Start showing up to those meetings. They will be surprised when you start showing up because they don't expect you to show up. They want to go in those meetings in an hour, pass tons of legislation that affects you in a very dramatic and extreme way. They're passing these legislations, and then you are at home frustrated and screaming and on Facebook, going off, but they're fine in their homes. Please start going to your city council meetings, start calling them, start calling your state representatives. Again, these meetings are for you. They're open to the public, but again, if the public don't go, that's how they're able to pass all the legislation that we disagree about.
You actually started answering my next question, and this is not just for the panel, but the collective knowledge in the room, and that's like, what are the things that we can do to engage and to press forward? And I think that includes civic engagement, like you've talked about, but to the point about us like being able to work together when we don't agree on every little thing, it also includes just community connection. So I would love to hear first from the rest of the panel and then from the room, what are the things that you think we can do to move forward? What are the spaces where you feel connected and where there aren't enough people connecting in our community to build movements up?
And I thought I'd share this from the speech too. It's related to this idea. Somehow this situation can and will be changed. Let us not wallow in the valley of despair. It's related to this idea of sort of what can we do?
Well, I'll finish up again, like I said, just encouraging everybody to attend these community meetings that are going on. There's one right now going on with the Office of Safe and Healthy Neighborhoods for anti-violence prevention. Start going to those. They have the flyer up. But again, start plugging yourself into the organizations that are out there doing the work, like Kentucky Alliance, like the Goodwill, like the Urban League. And again, getting involved in these organizations doesn't mean that they're perfect, but we all have to work together, back to my earlier point, and unify towards a common goal. We don't want to unify to bring about change because we're too busy arguing over insignificant things when they're making plans to hurt us long term. So I would just say, start getting involved in your community, start sharing more information, start having those tough conversations that are going to help you not just now, but for our future generations and the youth and kids of tomorrow.
Yeah, I think we have to build on relationships. I'm just thinking about when I was at the chair at the Kentucky Alliance, and we had some from the lawyers, the team of people that came together collectively from all different backgrounds and economic strategies, is building on that. And I think we see too much of people operating in silos, and that is hurting us. You have the haves and the have-nots, and they're not coming together because policy in Frankfurt is killing us. What happens locally, and they take it another step higher as far as in Frankfurt. And what Ann Brayton used to say, white people got to come together and talk to white people. Black people, we know our struggle, but we are of one kind and one people. They have to see us coming together. We don't see that enough. In the 60s and 70s, we were together. We was locking arms. We was, chained and doing things. That's not happening. They'll talk to you on the side, oh yeah, I feel you, but you're not at the table where I'm not at the table with your voice to make changes and demand changes for us as a community, as a people, because we will destroy ourselves.
See, I want to reiterate what they both just said as far as the importance of getting involved in local organizations. I think a lot of our problems in our society, and the sociological data backs this up, have resulted in an increased amount of isolation, alienation of individuals. And I think part of that despair that she was just talking about, I think comes from the idea that you don't actually see people together doing things together on a regular basis. So I do think that a good step is to join something, and not just join something, be a part of it. I will plug my organization. I am an active member of the Democratic Socialists of America. We have about 450 members locally at this point. We had 2 meetings this past week where 100 people packed into a room. Most of them new because they were interested and excited about possibly trying to organize in the context we're in. Obviously, they're scared. That's part of it. But getting people into a room together to work and talk is that first step. to go back to the chess checkers metaphor, getting people in a room together is just simply, and learning with each other, educating each other is that first step of this is how the pieces move. And then, I'm a decent chess player, I'm not that good. But when I do teach kids how to play chess, I say, after you know how the pieces move, the most important thing is to think about your first 3 steps. You don't just do one move at a time. You think about your moves in tandem. And I think, like I said, the first step is getting together with other people who are like you or who are somewhat like you, joining something and staying involved.
That was beautiful. I'm going to get to you in a second. I just want to tell everybody, if you're like me and you go to these events and then in the car on the way home, you're like, why didn't I say that? This is the 10-minute warning. So if you do have something that you want to share, we will do our best to get to you with a hand raised. We've got a hand back there, and then we'll go here to Micah. Did you have a hand here in the back? Did I see that? Yeah.
Oh, hi, I'm Avram Khan. I am the founder and executive director of an emerging spiritual community here in Louisville. I'll have to agree with that gentleman right there. You need to join an organization where you feel. You need to investigate those organizations and research them and feel good about them, not join an organization where there's too many different opinions. I'm a spiritual, we want to focus on spiritual. If you want to be social justice, if you want to be food justice, join an organization that is like-minded. Don't try to change people's attitude. That will cause so much friction and make people against your organization, against what you're fighting for, because you're disruptive to the group. That's all I need to say.
We'll go, I think, Micah, you had something, and then we've got down here. And I see one back there as well.
Hello, my name is Micah, a pretty famous, well-known person in Louisville. I just want to let you know, people can be afraid of change. They think that, I want people just to explain to me about, I'm not going to bring up maybe Donald Trump or anybody like that, but what's going on? What do you think democracy is going to be taken away, or life be taken away, or school education? That's what people are more concerned about. They're more concerned about rights, immigrant, education, and democracy. When I say democracy, I talk about people have the right to vote. Mm-hmm. And people are just afraid that this president might become a king or a dictator, which means he's going to be here for life. Can you explain to me what could happen or what not going to happen?
So, as we get the mic down there, Rhonda, I wonder, the idea that Micah brings up about fear of change, I mean, you've seen a lot of that, a lot of change in this city. I wonder if you could comment on that idea, fear of change.
Oh, the fear of change? Yeah, people get comfortable and they fear of change. But change is going to happen whether we like it or not. And I think that it can be changed for the good if good people come together to work towards better change. Yeah, we all down right now because of who is in higher office, but that person I don't think will have the last say. Times look hard, it will be hard, but we are resilient people as far as humanity, and I think that the change that we want to see, we have to be the change that we want to see. And if we come together, change could be what we want it to be.
We needed a microphone in the front row, too. I wanted to share this before we get to that mic. Robert, you might be able to quote this verbatim. We read a story about Maddie Jones a couple times in the history of Louisville Magazine, and we quoted her voicemail. Do you know it? Do you know it?
Yes.
Do you want to just say it?
God,
The voicemail.
Oh, God. What was,
I'll read.
say freedom is like.
Remember, my brothers and sisters, peace, justice, and equality. Freedom is a constant struggle. That's her voicemail. It remains so today. It's just relevant to everything we're talking about. If we can get the mic back in this row, and then we've got someone here in the front row. Okay.
I just wanted to throw you a curveball, Josh, and say that we actually have a little extra time. So the conversation is so compelling.
So now is your 10-minute.
So now if we want to, but really, I do encourage you to speak up in the next 10 minutes or so.
Excellent. Thank you, Sarah. There was a hand over there. Yeah, we'll get it.
My name is Angelita Wilkerson, and I think the biggest part of this topic is healing the land. And when we look at the highest court, where we have chauvinists, bias, racist people holding those seats, and then you have organizations and companies that can sway the conversation, where we are looking for democracy, where we want democracy, but it can't be attained because there's so many components that won't allow it. And I think there needs to be a check and balance for those people that can change laws such as, for example, Roe versus Wade. I mean, that's essential for some people. And there's just no check and balance for it. You know, we work hard for it. Our ancestors, our forefathers, they worked very hard for that. And that's just a small part. The bigger part is just living every day and trying to get justice.
Thank you.
Thank you for sharing that here in the front.
My name's Katie Green. I'm a Quaker. I live in Florida. And I just want to say that the talking about speaking with your neighbors is one of the hardest parts of this work. And we've been working for change, at least, you know, my family and I, for 40 years, and this election didn't just happen. It was planned for 50 years. So in Florida, my husband tells me we have to take people for where they're at, like the gentleman was saying before me. And, you know, I remember a few of us going to the school board and getting the Moms for Liberty away. They did not win any of those elections. They were trying to take over and fire our superintendent and put the right-wing agenda into the school in Pinellas County. They didn't. Okay. But taking people from where they're at, what I'm planning on doing, and I hope it will work, is just inviting people to my home for a watch party. Let's see a movie. How about starting with Bad Faith, which is the story of the Christian nationalists taking over our political system?
Go ahead, Robert.
I want to reiterate what she
get back here right
just said. That was extremely important. So I've been involved in a lot of political races around the country. It's a hobby of mine, honestly, to go around the country knocking doors and talking to people. And one of the things about knocking doors and talking to people is that you get to see the full breadth of how strange and amazing and sometimes awful people are. I actually was in Pinellas County a couple years ago. My good friend Richie Floyd is on the city council in Pinellas and in St. Pete. and I helped knock doors for him. And the one thing about knocking doors in Florida is like, it's not like most places where like there's a liberal part of town and you sort of know what you're gonna get. No, it was like, you have no idea what you're gonna get in Florida. Like Florida man is real. And it's amazing. I really, it's something I encourage everyone to do. If you can, knock doors and have conversations with people about the political issues that face them. It will scare you, but also even when they're your you know, on the other side of your politics or whatever, it will give you a better sense of the humanity of the people who are, you know, opposed to us or opposed to you in some way. It's I think the most vital tool really as far as soul building, but also informing your own politics.
We had a hand back here, and then we had one up here as well.
Greetings from your neighboring state of Tennessee. I'm a retired city government, and in our city, we flipped the script on change by bringing the government to the people as all of these last four statements to merge them together in a real quick comment. What we did is we took the city council and the city court systems, and in my department, codes department, we brought our government into the neighborhoods, and we established neighborhood organizations. So one thing to merge the relationship and take away the us versus them mentality out of this whole picture is to have city court in your neighborhood. The neighborhood code enforcement people were coming in and having dialogue with the neighborhoods. The police department, we had the broken windows theory. Well, if you see broken windows, vacant structures, our department could go in, and where they had to get probable cause to go in buildings, we could go in under code enforcement and bring those situations to a head, establish ownership with the city council. Instead of sitting behind, you going to city council came to you. Each representative from that district came to that neighborhood and established a rapport with that person and that whole neighborhood group. So, I mean, that's one thing. If you want to, you know, contact me about city and how the neighborhoods can merge together, I'd be happy to speak to that.
We had a hand up here. I know we have like 5 minutes. I wanted to share this quote. At the magazine, we're doing some work, story in the Russell neighborhood. We did a group interview with a lot of people from Russell. And a woman, I love that you used the word elder to describe yourself. She did too. She's about your age. She said.
Miss Rhonda said,
Rhonda,
Lord, now these kids out here calling themselves elders.
She said the elders who were, but listen, she said the elders who were a part of the community when I was coming up, they burned out. And I don't want to burn out because it can be exhausting. That's a theme that's come up here a lot. You mentioned high schoolers, college students already feeling that. I wonder if we can end sort of in this space of how do you prevent yourself from burning out? And I love this idea of chess versus checkers. And I wonder, people who are here today who maybe have attended other Festival of Faiths events this week and are feeling sort of energized. I've noticed that when I leave events like this, sometimes as soon as the car ride home, it just dissipates and I'm now, you know, in just the wave of life. And I wonder, sort of, I know that's a lot of questions, but this idea of if you are looking to channel that energy into a positive outcome for your community, like how do you do so? How do you not burn out and keep it going?
How do you keep hope alive?
And we had a hand back here. Will you wait for the microphone so we can hear you?
I am an elder. I've been on lots of things over 60 years. But the thing that comes to mind, someone's been working for a magazine here. I hear, like, we all showed up today. So give us a place to go to keep showing up. And I think that magazine, give us some options. Because I think there's this energy that can be used from right here.
Anybody else? We have a couple hands up there.
Thanks. Hi, my name is Robin Burke. I'm a filmmaker and social activist, friend of many here. Was also very active in the protests and work with youth 18 to 24 primarily. But mostly I'm a filmmaker, and I'm looking for spaces where we are all together to tell these stories, but also to bring it in a creative way to where we are together and calm and are sharing not only the spaces, but our hearts and our heart center, because there are few places, but they are small places generally, from my observations. And I'd like to offer a bomb of a project I've been working on for a couple of years in great despair on the heels of the protest and with injuries and mental wellness, to your point, and to the point of being local. One place that I find where we are all meeting, loving, healing, caring, is in aquatherapy pools and in our public recreation centers. And those are also connected to policy in a very deep way, particularly here, now, and in our state, and where our resources and our funds go, and in every single neighborhood. I made a film called Ripples and Pools that you can see, where we can advocate for these healing spaces. Every person of every type, age, social, money, blah, 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 all heal together in this most vulnerable space in the water. And so I invite you to, all of us, to take care of ourselves as we continue to fight. I'm 65 years old. I've been out there a long time. I've seen, even in this life, a lot of things come this way, you know, and be like so righteous and then be smacked down. Our nervous systems can't take that. So the thing that makes you go, yeah, do that. Do more of that, you know? That's what I'm finding, and I can share with you, has really worked, and I've had a really long experience there with hundreds of people sharing this healing space together without a whole lot of judgment, and sharing points of view in the water. You hear so much in the water that, you know, you're in your bathing suit, you're basically naked, so there's no arguments there, you know. It is a beautiful place and a beautiful space for activism, because it is ours to fund, to make superb. You know, we don't need run-down spaces. We need world-class healing recreational spaces that all of us can go and be together in.
We had a hand here, and then I know we're at time, and Rhonda, I want to pose a question to you. To think about maybe while you're sharing. Sarah Kelly, who gave our amazing introductions earlier, when Gabrielle and Sarah and I were on a Zoom call talking about this event, we suggested Maddie Jones, and Sarah called her, and she immediately was like, I'm in. And she's 91, 92, she's 91 years old. Rhonda, you shared that you met her in the 80s, so you've known her for 40 years. I guess I'd love to give you sort of the last word after we hear from here. How do you keep going? How, after so long, you know, Maddie, like I said, she's 90, she's still doing this work. How do you do that? But let's go here, and then I'll let you think on that, and then we'll wrap up, and we'll still be up here. We'd love to hear if you still have stuff to share. We'll hang around a little bit, but we are at time.
Good morning. My name is Aubrey, and I'm not from the United States, and so I've been listening and learning and feel really like a guest here learning. The piece that I've connected with is the use of the word elder, and it's not necessarily somebody who's older in age. It's someone who is recognized and honored in the community. And you, so you say you're in your mid-40s, but it sounds like you're an elder for your community. And you're mentioning your grandmother, Maddie, who is 90-something, and so she's an elder. So it's the piece that I'm connecting with is that the elder is the person who gathers people and tells the story and honors the story and anchors people in their story, in their traditions, and in their spirituality, whatever their spirituality looks like. And so we encourage, or I encourage, and the piece that I'm taking home is that gift of the elders in our community and spending time in circles, listening and honoring the elders, but that forms and shapes people within themselves. So thank you for that teaching about the elders.
Oh, I like that.
I like that a lot.
I came in a village, a small town, that we always honored the elders, and it seemed like it was a generational shift as far as younger people not wanting to hear about what old people got to say. You done had your day, it's our day, you know. But as he stated, as far as learning from the past and how can you correlate and make the past and where we are now, the present, work. My self-care is sometimes I just have to separate. Everybody say I'm everywhere because I like to be in places that people don't expect me to be at. The table is not set for me, so I bring my own fork and set up my own table. But it's just innate in me is that it's a God thing for me, it's spirituality, that this is just part of my journey and part of my path. And I just care about people. I care about all people, but my heart is with my impacted, marginalized Black and brown people, because we are rooted in racism, disparity. All of this is happening. They give us a little crumbs from the table, but we're not at the table to get a full meal. So that keeps me going and hopeful for the next generation as far as with Mel and them accepting me, because I was out there before Breonna Taylor and with the Ku Klux Klan and fighting for justice and still not seeing justice happening. And then with Donald Trump, that we might even see this officer get off. He's going to give everybody a grace. So it's hard. But my thing is that, you know, we constantly fighting for our freedom. We have to love each other. And then our chains will be broken if we come together as one people. We're going to have our differences, but if we're fighting for the good can outweigh the evil.
Gabrielle, any final thoughts to share?
I'll just share a little bit about what we've been talking about in this conversation and some threads that we followed all along. One is that even when our faith in each other is shaken, our faith in our higher power, the universe, the forces around us persists. So I would say leaning into that and thinking about how we can connect with each other. Thinking about justice through a lens of not being punitive, but being about restoration of what is right. I love that. I think someone in the audience said that, and I think that resonated through some of the conversations that we're having. Remembering the past and reflecting on things that have worked and doing those things. I think on the panel we said something about us refusing to do things that have worked in the past nowadays. And in addition to sort of the collective threads of the conversation, I was really struck by some of these takeaways about, like, what is it that we do next? What can we do? One of those things we talked about collectively was being intentional about connecting with and learning from the past. Ms. Rhonda, I love that you brought up the power of social media. I've been a history nerd since before social media existed, since I was this one size, and that has compounded on social media. There's even more ways for me to connect with the past. Getting engaged in the civic process, showing up at your city council meetings, your neighborhood association meetings, Board of Education meetings, other places like that. Somebody so eloquently just said, join something and be a part of it. So find something that speaks to you, join it, and be active in it. Give us a place to show up, and we'll show up there. I actually have some homework for me and Josh around that, I think, as media outlets in this city that I was struck with by that. And then finally, our person up here who talked about recreational spaces, and the biggest theme I think I took away from that resonated throughout the conversation is find what gives you joy and do it. Lean into those spaces as the spaces that you can show up and build connection and build community.
Thank you all so much for being here this morning. I think we've got